upload, we're going to say hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. This is Veterans Breakfast Club for Monday, July 12th. Welcome. Tonight, we are going to be talking with VETlanta, an organization down in Atlanta. Hello, Facebook. Hello, started in YouTube. Just a couple minutes and invite everybody into the room. I am flying solo tonight for those of you who have joined us in the past. Super excited for that. Todd DePastina, who you all VETlanta, an organization down in Atlanta. Is traveling. Hello, and Ellie, who we usually introduce as well. Ellie is unavailable. So you might hear me repeat this as we invite everybody into the room. We are a minute away. Hope you guys did your vocal warm-ups. There you go. There you go, Lloyd.
Yeah, Zach's the one with the radio voice.
And I definitely don't have a face made for TV, so I gotta have something, you know.
There you go. That's a good raspy voice. Kevin's got one too. So Kevin, even though we can't see you, I might just have you chime in. Just to hear your voice.
Kevin does got to have a great voice. I found that voice. I was the first one to put him on radio.
Let's see here. All right. Can you guys hear the music? All righty. I'm going to turn this up and let everybody into the room. I went with the music, a little different music tonight. I really like that. That's some nice, good, easy listening music there. Welcome everyone to Veterans Breakfast Club for Monday, July 12th. I'm Sean Hall, the Director of Programming. Welcome. Super excited to have everyone here tonight. I see great many familiar faces. Pete Mecca joining us outside of Veterans Story, which is our normal Thursday night program. Hi, Pete. Glenn, our host for Greatest Generation Live. Either you guys are here to keep tabs on me or you just decided that tonight was a free night. So I appreciate you guys coming on. How are you doing?
I'm great, Sean. Great. I'm happy to be on. It's storming outside, so I thought I'd come inside and hear your storm instead.
All right. Happy to have you. Pete, you as well. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Sean. Glad to be here.
Excellent. And you got that Southern drawl, and that leads me to our guest tonight, which we're going to get to in just a few minutes. But welcoming everyone, we're going to have VETlanta, an organization that is based in Atlanta, coming on tonight to chat with us about all things VETlanta, their organization. They have several veterans a part of the organization that will be joining us. We're going to talk to them about their service. And as you can see, I am pretty much flying solo tonight. As I said, Todd is actually... He's traveling right now. And Ellie said, you can deal with this on your own. I'm taking the night off. I said, great. So if at any point everybody gets muted, that might mean that we have a bomber in the room, a Zoom bomber, and I'm going to mute everyone and make sure that they get booted. I am not a bouncer. I'm not bouncer by trade. I could not be one in real life, but I get to be one here in the Zoom room. And for those of you who know me, as I have an acting background, I can play a very good bouncer on TV. It's all about camera angles. So I actually, before we get started, we have a couple announcements for VBC in general. This coming Wednesday, we have our first in-person program in 16 months. 16 months. It was the last time we had an in-person program was at Point Park University. And as the pandemic shut everything down, we transferred everything online. We haven't been back to in-person until this coming Wednesday. It'll be at 2 Mile Run in Beaver County, which is my hometown. I know it well. I've played basketball in their basketball courts many times. So if you have not reserved a spot, I think that we are almost at, if not at capacity, but you are more than welcome to come. It's $15 a head. And we're going to be doing veteran stories. I'll be there walking around with an iPad, streaming everything we're doing there onto the Zoom room. So if you can't come to the in-person event at 2 Mile Run, pop onto Zoom. We'll be on there chatting with the veterans there in person. So hope to see you either there or here on Zoom. Now, also, our podcast has been, I would say, knocking it out of the park for the last couple of weeks, but I'm the host, so maybe I'm tooting my own horn just a little too much there. But 2 weeks ago, we did an episode called War Music, which was all about Vietnam era music. And this has gotten a great many responses from our veteran network. I'm really excited by that. I want to ask Don Nemchek, who was a part of that episode. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Don, and chat with us a little bit about your thoughts on what that podcast was. Like, what did we talk about? Why should everybody go to our website and listen to it? So yeah, did you have a good time recording it?
I certainly did, Sean, and thank you for that opportunity. Just to give everybody a little bit of thumbnail, what we did was we compiled some songs from the Vietnam era. Some of them were protest songs, some of them were mainstream songs, and some of them were songs that maybe not everyone heard. But what we tried to get across was how music was very impactful during Vietnam. I opened the show with a kind of a synopsis of that. In 1965, the country was still in the afterglow of World War II, if you will, as a society. We were economically doing well, etc. Most teens come home at 4 o'clock, watch Dick Clark's show on ABC, drank some Coca-Cola and danced the twist. Things started to change in 66 and 67. The war increased. Of course, you have to remember we had a draft in place, and having a draft in place changed everything around. People start saying, hey, why are we sending people over there? Our friends aren't coming back, or they're coming back wounded or harmed in some way. And the music started to be very influential. As the war increased, 67, 68, we had over 500,000 GIs in country. Of those 500,000, everyone brought part of their neighborhood with them in their music. You had the, we'll just say the hippies listening to Cat Stevens doing Moon Shadow. You had the rednecks, if you will, listening to Merle Haggard and Hank Williams doing Okie from Muskogee and other songs about their truck and their farm and everything. And then you had the African Americans, after civil rights things started to heat up, James Brown singing, "Shout it out loud, I'm black and I'm proud." So you had three factions of Americans, everyone trying to identify with their own music. And you have to remember, that was a big part of our off time, having music around us, music from back home. We had Armed Forces Network, which was a kind of a closed circuit, if you will, somewhat restricted radio station until the iconic Adrian Crombauer from Good Morning Vietnam came on and started playing the music of our time. Woodstock happened in 69. We still had the draft going on. Woodstock begot Jimi Hendrix, wailing out the Star Spangled Banner. And how did that influence people? Gee, that wasn't the traditional Star Spangled Banner. This is something that was kicking out, something was some people determined as disrespectful. Myself as a veteran, I did not. I thought it was something that it personified how the country was starting to feel. You had the loss of President Johnson. He had over 200,000 people shouting, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many babies you killed today?" Drove the man crazy. And you had Nixon in 1970 taking the heat for the deaths of 4 students at Kent State University. That begot Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young to sing the song 4 Dead in Ohio, which was almost the theme song of the protests. So given all that, music was very, very influential. It was interesting to us as we spoke. We had an Iraqi veteran with us, and they didn't have that same identity to their music. They went over with their iPhone and their headphones in place. They listened to whatever they wanted to listen to, and nobody was really identifying it and having allegiance to it. So I thought it was a very well done show, just not because I was part of it, and Sean did a great job kind of keeping things alive. I think we had our own perspectives to it. We all had something to say about it, and I was just very proud and to be on it. I had a great time, and I'm looking forward to reading those reviews, and hopefully they'll keep coming and we can compile them and present them to our audience again.
Yeah, that's a great take there, Don. You were wonderful in that episode, and a good friend of mine from college, Kevin Cook, joined us. He would describe himself as a music dork, though I say he's a music historian, and I really got the idea for the episode thinking about him and how much knowledge he has about music and the history of music. I thought getting him and Don in the same room together and just letting them chat would be just a very interesting conversation. So I'm going to put here also in the chat, I put a link to the YouTube, the actual recording, video recording of that podcast. Also going to put the playlist. We created a playlist of songs from the podcast. So you can go to that link there, go to YouTube. That should play a lot of the highlight songs that we talk about. And as you could tell from what Don was saying, we dive into a lot of things. We don't just stick with the main, top hits. We really dug into the music. So like I said, we had a lot of really great responses, excuse me, from that episode. So what we're going to do is we're going to record a Scuttlebutt short here next week, and we're going to read a lot of those responses, record us talking about them and the responses that we got and the experiences, kind of bring a human element to the music. Really can't wait for that. I think this podcast was worthy of a 2.0. What did you call that? There was not a sequel. I guess you would call it for volume 2. That would be volume 2 for the second. So both of those are in the chat, both those links, and the most recent episode of the Scuttlebutt featured Bill Arkin, who, if any of you know the name Bill Arkin, he was a CNN analyst, but he also was a veteran back in the 70s of the Army. He became an intelligence analyst, he's wrote a dozen books, a couple of them are bestsellers. He was a writer for New York Times, for the Washington Post, the LA Times. We had him on talking about his most recent book, The Generals Have No Clothes. Very interesting book. So check out that episode, which just released this past Monday. Actually, that's today. I'm off on days, so it was today. So without further ado, again, thank you all for joining us tonight. If you have questions for our VETlanta guests, please feel free to throw them into the chat. I will be checking over on Facebook periodically to see if we can have anything going on over there. And if by chance, I'll just say to Glenn and Pete that if I lose power, I don't want the VBC to run around like a chicken with its head cut off. I'm sure I can trust both of you to pick up the baton should the inevitable terrible thing happen.
Pete, it's all yours.
All yours, Pete, just in case.
I'm getting very nervous.
They'll treat you well. They're Southern boys as well down there.
I know that's right. What do you mean I have an accent? What are you talking about?
I just heard the faintest twang, and I'm not sure if it's just coming through the speaker that way, but I don't know. You might want to get your computer looked at.
I tell you one thing. When I used to go to Scranton, Pennsylvania for the family reunions with my Italian relatives, I never longed for a date because the girls just love my accent.
It's much better than the Pittsburgh accent, I'll tell you that, because nobody finds that to be romantic in the least. So welcome to the program, Hassan Rollins, Zach Knight, Lloyd Knight, and though you can't see him, Kevin Horgan from VETlanta. Welcome, gentlemen. It's really great to have you all a part of the program.
Thanks for having us.
Definitely. Lloyd, I'm gonna start off with you because you are the man in charge of VETlanta. Is that right?
Yep. I'm one of the co-founders and have been running the organization for all 7.5 years with a great team.
And I want to sort of get some history of you before we get to the main VETlanta portion here. You are a veteran of the Air Force.
Yeah, I am. I joined the Air Force out of Fort Knox, Kentucky. I'm an Army brat. So I joined when I was 17 and I became an aircraft loadmaster. So flying and seeing the whole world and involved in everything. For the first 17 years of my career, primarily flying the 141 Starlifters, but also got some time flying the C-5 Galaxy and C-23 Sherpas. And then I spent my final 3 years in the Air Force as a first sergeant, first with a medical group, and then a comm squadron.
So what year you were 20 years Air Force?
Yeah, 20 years. I joined in December of 86 and retired in 2007.
So you were in through Storm Desert Shield.
Yeah, I was. Went into first Just Cause, and then in the Desert Storm when I was really, really young.
What was that experience like?
You know what? It was something very different. My first 3 years, you got to figure 86, 87 to 90, the enemy was the Russians, the Soviets, the Cold War. Everything we trained for was that. And then here I am in Just Cause, launching out of Charleston, 45 C-141s, launching all at once to do airdrops in Panama. So I had never seen anything like that. Much different than, not different from what we trained, just kind of a different perspective. And then I had the great opportunity to spend the first 3 years of my career operationally in Charleston, and then moved over to flight test at Wright-Patterson. And a Desert Storm actually started when I was in flight test. And we had a much different mission. All the military airlift command, or what we become Air Mobility Command, aircraft were flying in Saudi Arabia and in Kuwait and in the desert supporting that. We actually picked up a mission to do commissary runs in the rest of the world. So we were supporting places like Iceland and Greenland, Kenya, the embassies in Argentina and all over, South America, and, places that stopped getting their commissary runs. And so it was much different, when talking about the war effort, we were supporting, the families and the troops that were, still there at home station, overseas.
So you got to travel everywhere.
Yeah, I've been blessed. I through a career at UPS and being a crew member in the Air Force and vacations, I've traveled to 71 countries and 48 states. Wow. So I've seen a lot of very cool things.
What made you pick the Air Force to begin with?
My dad was in the Army for 20 years, and then my older brother was in the Air Force. So I saw the difference, but really one of the real reasons is I wanted to fly. And there was lots of opportunities for me to fly in the Air Force.
Zach is ribbing you nice and good here in the chat. I'm not sure. 20 years Chair Force equals 5 years Army, but I believe that Lloyd might have you in travel alone. Zach, how many places have you been to?
I mean, just one, but it was like a combat zone in Afghanistan,
I'm glad to see that the nice ribbing takes place also outside of the Pittsburgh area veteran market here. Like the ribbing is pretty good consistently across the board.
No, it has to be. And there's no relation between Lloyd and I. I just have to let that be known. This is good old natured. Army's just better,
Well, before we dive into that particular argument, Lloyd, I'll give you a rebuttal as to why the Air Force it might be considered one of the better branches. What did you love about it?
You know what? I loved what I ended up missing the most, and that's the people. So the people were phenomenal. I had an incredible job. I logged over 3,000 flight hours. So I'm starting to miss the airplane, which I didn't miss for a long time, because flying on an airplane that is older than you without all the creature comforts does get old. But so starting to miss that. Yeah, that's not me.
That's not you. Not sure who that is. I got sent some pictures. Is this you?
No, that's John Phillips.
That's John.
That's me.
There you are. Okay, I got some pictures from you guys. I want to make sure I got the right one.
Yeah, that's me and flying in the back of a 141. So you know what? I miss the people a lot, but really my VETlanta story talks about it starts with retiring on a Friday and moving to Atlanta and starting with UPS at the following Monday. I was pretty lucky. I got hired right on to UPS as a manager. I jumped into a great position and did big things and got promoted up the totem pole really quickly, 3 times in 4 years, and was able to jump into a job where I continued to travel. In fact, I went to Afghanistan. Never made it to Afghanistan with the Air Force, but I made it there with UPS. So things were going great. I was making more money than I ever made in the Air Force, but there was something missing. and and it took me a little bit to figure out, and it was the people. So, and I had a chance to start the first Veterans Business Resource Group at UPS about 9 years ago. And I really didn't want to do it at the time because I was really busy. I was traveling all the time. I was finishing up a master's degree, and really working very hard. And I did it, and immediately I started to have kind of more satisfaction in my life.
Did they come to you to build that portion, or did you sort of offer that?
I built it from scratch. So at the time, UPS, the only leadership development and our business resource group we had was women's leadership development. That was it. We were decades in front of everybody else with women's leadership development. And I got to say, they were totally inclusive. I got to do a lot of their team building exercises and lunch and learns and see their guest speakers. But the company, like many companies, especially Fortune 500 companies, started to about 10 years ago, started this business resource group concept, and UPS decided to start them, an African American group and an Asian Pacific group, LGBTQ group, and a veterans group, and I started the very first veterans group that we had, started from scratch with just a very little small amount of guidance, and here we are, the 9 years, 10 years later, and we have 24 chapters across the country.
Wow. So talk to me a bit about you're the co-creator of VETlanta. How did that all begin? How long has it been going on? Give me the skinny. What's the mission?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's about a year into my VBRG journey. I got a call from Coca-Cola, John Phillips at Coca-Cola, and John thought of a great idea. He said he wanted to get all the Fortune 500 veteran business resource groups that across Atlanta into a room and talk about what we were all doing for veterans. And so we had our first meeting about 7.5 years ago, and there were about 20 people from about 12 different Fortune 500 companies that showed up. The big ones in Atlanta, UPS and Delta, Coke, AT&T, Home Depot, McKesson, and we were really shocked by what we heard that night. Mm-hmm. Our companies collectively were hiring hundreds of thousands of employees each year. Our foundations were contributing millions of dollars to veteran causes each year, and our employees were volunteering thousands of hours each year, nationally, but more important, locally. So that was pretty big. But the one thing that was missing, this is absolutely incredible, was nobody was talking to each other. Mm-hmm. So here we had this chance to have this big, amazing network, and everybody was operating in silos. Mm-hmm. And I really, this amazes people that know me. I didn't talk a whole lot that first meeting. I kind of sat on my hands and thought, wow, this could be something special. And then we had a second meeting. It was such a good first meeting. We had a second meeting. That second meeting would lay the foundation, what would become VETlanta. And that is pure and honest dialogue about the good, the bad, and the ugly in the space. And every one of these of you that are involved with volunteering in the veteran space, you've all seen the good, bad, and ugly. There are over 40,000 nonprofits in this country that are dedicated to or that say they're dedicated to supporting veterans. There's a lot of good ones, especially here in Atlanta, but there's some bad ones, and I identify the bad ones as in two ways. Either it's an organization, and we all can think of them, that are too focused on raising that next dollar versus supporting veterans. Or, there's a lot of veteran nonprofits that are started for good reasons, and the founders, their heart and soul are in the right spot. They just don't ever have the abilities to be effective with your donor dollars or your volunteer hours. And then there's the ugly. The ugly is the fraudsters, scammers, and schemers that are out there. And and what we identified is we need to build this network to talk about the fraudsters, scammers, and schemers, and that's what we did. We started having routine meetings, and then the ball got tossed to me, and they kind of put it together, and we started having early morning pancake breakfast. And I started meeting with Kevin Horgan, who's a retired from UPS and a Marine Corps veteran. And for those of you Marines on this Zoom, I've learned to love Marines, and really they've impressed me. And started meeting with people who didn't know anything about veterans, and started getting guidance. And we formed VETlanta in a very different way. The first thing we did was we opened it up to anybody who wanted to help veterans, just not the Fortune 500 companies. And then we took a revolutionary step, and the revolutionary step was we wrote a charter that said, hey, we're not going to be a 501c3, we're going to be a chartered club. And we're going to be a chartered club, and we're going to do this by never accepting any money or giving any money. We're going to be focused on volunteerism, and we're going to be focused on collaboration. And wow, that ended up being a very big deal and a very popular, and it gave us a lot of advantages, in which we can talk about, but it also gave us a lot of growth. So here we are 7.5 years later, and we have a membership of over 4,000 people.
Of 4,000 in 8 years.
4,000, yeah.
That's incredible. And so also this summit that you have coming up is a pretty big deal. This is a multi-year. You guys have done this annually?
No, we do our summits every quarter, believe it or not. Every quarter, and our summit started off with 20 or 30 people. I used to invite my wife, who actually is always in the crowd now in VETlanta, and a big part of it, but used to invite my wife and my administrative assistant just to fill empty chairs. And then people started getting it. They started getting on to what we were doing, and we started building trust in the organization, and our brand started meaning something. And then we grew. And so our summits are used to attract and advise and inform both family members and veterans that are looking for assistance, but really to connect the dots and really advertise the nonprofits that are out there that provide assistance or are looking for volunteers, the companies that are out there hiring, and really to build that network. So each quarter, a company, or sometimes a nonprofit, sometimes the Air National or the Georgia National Guard hosted one time, will provide a venue and will provide food and beverage, and then we set it up with guest speakers. And that second year we started averaging 100 people for the summits. By year 5 we were at about 400, and then right before we went into the pandemic, we had our first super summit, which is at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is our Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United football stadium here. And we're very blessed. The president of the Falcons United Stadium is an Army veteran, and we had over 1,000 people at that first super summit. The governor of Georgia was our keynote speaker. So we've decided for our first in-person summit in September that we're going to recreate that. We're going to have super summit number 2, looking at having 1,500 plus people there, and going to have a big blowout and a lot of fun doing it.
And what do you, going back to the genesis of this, it was invented to create a great community for veterans in Atlanta. Is that correct?
Yeah, our mission is to make Atlanta the premier community in the entire country for veterans and their families to work and live. Atlanta is we're not a military town. We don't really have active duty military bases here in Atlanta. We have some great guard sites, but so we're not a military town, and for some reason Atlanta never appears on any of the lists. I think the people who create this list hate traffic. They don't like sweet tea, and we're never on any of the lists. But the fact of the matter is everything's here, and so we're just starting to put attention to it, build the network, and and tweaking some things and having a lot of success with it.
Hey, Lloyd,
That's fine. Go ahead, Pete.
yeah, this is Pete McElroy. How many members do you have in Atlanta?
So we have 4,000 members that have signed up for our mailing list, and we from what we've seen, we've had over 1,500 different people come to our summits in the last 2 years.
Okay. Do you meet? How often do you meet and where?
So we meet. VETlanta our summits are every quarter. So we'll have a summit every quarter, and that's an opportunity that is wide open to anybody who wants to attend. And then we have in between the summit breakout sessions. So we'll focus on a topic like homeless veterans, and then we'll get a company, whether it's Coca-Cola or UPS or Delta or one of the nonprofits, to host a smaller event. Maybe it's 10 people, maybe it's 100 people. And then the board kind of meets a little bit more routine. We try to do a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting every month.
Does that answer your question, Pete?
It does. Lloyd, you and I need to get together. I am from Atlanta, but I'm in St. Augustine right now, but my base is in Georgia. I need to do an article on VETlanta. Maybe I can help you that way. I get a full page in the Georgia papers. I could do a veteran story on you. It's called a veteran story. And then we can make a big pitch for VETlanta. Have you ever heard of the Atlanta Vietnam Veterans Business Association?
Oh yeah, very, very familiar. They've come to our summits. We've actually given them a table, I believe, at some of our summits.
Okay, well, I'm a member there. So
Right.
When I'm in Atlanta and I'm going to one of those meetings, I'd like for you to attend with me.
Absolutely, Pete. Look forward to doing it.
Okay, now I'm also commander of Atlanta World War II Roundtable. So I'd like to have you there, maybe even have you as a speaker one day.
Yeah, would love to do it. So absolutely, just touch base with me, Pete. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I can or you could just take down my email address, and anybody can email me. It's my first name.
I sent my website to Sean and also to you.
Okay.
Just go to my website and
All
send an email through it. We need to hook up. I think we can help each other. And sounds good. I like what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pete. And I'm going to drop my email address in the chat now.
Okay.
Pete, Kevin Horgan, who Lloyd mentioned, he popped something in the chat. He said, "Has Pete written a book?" And yes, Pete has written a couple books. Pete, did you want to chat about any of those real quick, just so Kevin has the info?
In the background there, Sean?
Do I have the? I'm sorry.
Do you have them in the background, or is that?
Oh, these are all comic books.
Okay. All right. Can you put me up there, Sean?
I put you up there. You're spotlighted.
Oh, can you see this, fellas?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. That's the first one. Then I wrote this one for the ladies called Fights Like a Girl. Okay. Now, what I've done, I've interviewed about 500 of my brothers and sisters from all ranks, all branches of the military. I served 2.5 years in Vietnam, so been there and done that, and that's why veterans will talk to me. I can talk the lingo. All right, I don't make anybody out to be a hero. Matter of fact, my heroes from Vietnam are on that long black wall in Washington, D.C. I was with Air Force Intelligence. My mother was very proud of that, except when she ended up at a nursing home, she was telling all the residents that my son, Peter J., was in Air Force Intelligence in Vietnam. That's why we lost the war. but I enjoy what I'm doing. We just need to hook up, Lloyd. Let's see how we can help each other. And go to my website. You'll enjoy it. I also have 2 radio programs. I can get you on some of those programs. I wear too many hats. That's why I'm bald-headed.
Yeah. I'm not bald, but I wear a lot of hats too.
Speaking of all those hats, I brought up your website, Lloyd, on VETlanta, and saw that it highlights the 5 pillars. I thought maybe you could chat a bit about the 5 pillars of VETlanta.
Yeah, when we first started, we were just really focused on employment, and and then we're kind of scattered for everything. Because frankly, none of us had ever done this before. So John Phillips and Kevin Horgan and when we started, we were just kind of supporting anything that stuck, and then I got inspired listening to, and I'm going to say it again, listening to a Marine talk, a Marine colonel, and I said, "Holy cow, we need to put some really kind of structure into how we're going to support it." So so we came up with the 5 pillars, and I always say employment is the very first pillar, and the one that we focus on, because a lot of times, and this is the first sergeant coming out in me. If you give someone a job, a veteran or a family member, a spouse, it's going to help mitigate other issues. So and then a lot of us have a lot of influence when it comes to employment, and then from there we moved on to a healthcare pillar. We added that. The healthcare pillar largely focused on PTSD, and we're really blessed to have 2 amazing PTSD treatment centers here in Atlanta, and so we partnered with them. The third is housing, largely focused on homeless veterans, and really getting the homeless veterans the help they needed. Education focused. We've got some great colleges here in Georgia, so we have this network to help veterans who are going into school, but most of all, help them get out of school and back in the workforce, which is really, really important. And then we have our business pillar, and our business pillar is really focused on giving veteran-owned businesses attention within our some of the companies at UPS. All of our companies in VETlanta, all Fortune 500 companies have supplier diversity programs. So again, it's us trying to connect the dots, and those are our 5 pillars. But honestly, we go to a lot of different areas that are within those pillars, and if it's something that needs attention, we try to bring attention to it. And then we've seen a big shift over the years too. When we first started, we were largely focused on employment, and unemployment at the 7 years ago for veterans was 15%, and even higher for post 9/11 veterans. So our full force was with that. And then what did we see? We saw unemployment drop to virtually 0 in the Atlanta area for veterans. The number was like 1.9% for my Department of Labor buddies, but it was virtually 0. And we started putting a lot more effort. We would put these big events that would have 100 volunteers, and then 20 people show up that were looking for jobs. Mm-hmm. So that's when we started hey, we have to be really agile to be able to shift our focus areas, and we've created something that allows us to do that.
That's excellent. Lloyd, I'm going to come back to you for some more things about VETlanta. I want to get to your accomplices here tonight. I'm going to first pop over to Hassan. Hassan, welcome to VBC. Happy to have you here for the first time. How are you doing this evening?
I'm well, and you?
I'm doing great, thanks. So you sent me a really nice history here. 12-year Army vet. Do you also believe 5 years Army equals 20 years Air Force?
Maybe more. I'm not sure.
Oh, man. I should also mention that VBC came to know about VETlanta through something at the VA. We went through their CVEB website, started chatting with them at the VA at the national level. They have a website where they list a ton of organizations in every single state that sort of all connect through this CVEB network. And Todd sort of said to me, he voluntold me to, Sean, go connect with all of these organizations, every single one of them. This was a couple months back, and I've reached the point where I'm halfway through all of the states. This is how many more organizations there are. And at VETlanta was one of them that I just reached out to, said, hey, I'm just introducing Veterans Breakfast Club. Would love to connect with you guys, find out what you're doing, come on one of our programs, chat about you. So I thought I'd give everyone a little bit of quick history as to sort of how this episode came about. In that same vein, Hassan, how did your history in the military come about?
I was actually going to school for medicine, and while I was in school, I was a Marines ROTC program. And so when I decided I no longer wanted to go down that road with medicine, I ended up joining the Army.
So was that your last resort, or was it just kind of like, okay?
No, it was a way for me to try to find some independence for my family and get some adventure in between.
Okay. And so what year did you actually start? Was it 97?
In 97, yes.
So you were in through 9/11. Can you talk to me a bit about how everything changed? You went in at peacetime, probably never thought much of anything was really going to happen at that point.
I actually had already been deployed to the Middle East before that happened. And so when we had the inspectors in Iraq and Saddam didn't let us in, and then Clinton called the word to strike them with the cruise missiles, I was over there during that time as well. But during 9/11, since I'm actually from the New York metro area, I was in one of my leadership courses at the time, and it came over the radio that this airplane had struck one of the towers. And so I was thinking it was an accident. Then the second airplane struck, and then, all these different theories came out. And so, I mean, I was really touched by it because I thought any of my family members could have been there at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they called, I was ready to go. And so I went over to Qatar with special operations, and, we did some things. So
you were deployed to Iraq during the invasion?
I was actually based out of Qatar, and then we kind of jumped around to different places.
Mm-hmm.
And then this last time I did actually go to Iraq. So I was deployed to the Middle East like 3 separate occasions.
Were you deployed to Afghanistan at all?
I was in Afghanistan, but I wasn't stationed in
there. Can you tell me a bit about the difference between Iraq and Afghanistan?
There really didn't seem to be a whole bunch of difference between the two. So,
okay.
I mean, that's kind of the reason why they really pushed for me to go this third time, because a lot of the people that were in my unit at the time hadn't been deployed, and I had been over there 2 previous times. So they kind of pressured me to go along with them.
But you left in 2008? Is that when you got out?
That's when I was finally done, yes.
That finally done. Was that right? That was right before the surge. Is that correct?
No. There had been surges prior to that.
Okay. And why did you decide to get out?
It was just a time in my life where I was trying to transition to something else.
Mm-hmm.
So then I rolled over to public education. I was doing that for the next 12 years.
Now, why did you decide to go public education out of the Army? That seems to me like it'd be a big change.
Not at all. While I was in the Army, I felt like I was a teacher. I was, bringing up the new soldiers and teach them, different ways about the military, whether it was in their jobs or just the culture itself. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it was a natural progression to go into public education because I still wanted to continue doing that.
And what did you think about public education whenever you first got out? Obviously, yeah, I figured that'd be.
I used to tell the kids I had less stress being in the war zone than teaching them sometimes. So
yeah,
it was interesting, but it was also very rewarding. It has its difficulties. It had its difficulties, but it was also rewarding. So, you take the good with the bad.
Right. What grades were you teaching?
I taught 3rd through 8th grade, all subjects. So I was in elementary school. I was also in middle school, different subjects, coaching and administrator. So I did a number of things in the education field.
Hassan, did you get combat pay for teaching school?
I should have, but I missed out on that one.
And it's cool because I'm sort of seeing a theme throughout this evening, is sort of that idea of helping others. Lloyd, you mentioned, that brotherhood is really what you missed. Hassan, did you feel that same thing coming into the public education sector? Did you want to get back to some level of giving back? Did you feel like public education was that?
I felt like that was always in me, regardless of whether it was in public education, with the military, whatever I was doing. Even now with me searching for my next opportunity, I'm kind of going along the lines of human resources because I still want to support people. I still want to help them do whatever it is that they do. And so even now, that's why I'm a part of VETlanta, because I want to give back to our community and help veterans wherever I can and their families.
How'd you find out about VETlanta?
I was actually in another organization called 4 Block, and Lloyd was one of our speakers, and he did such a great job. And one of the other guys suggested that I touch base with him and see if I can help out over there.
And it being is all volunteer organization, correct?
Yes, it is.
Does that mean something to you?
Whether it's volunteer or not, just any way that I can give back to the veteran community is meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm. And is there something about the 5 pillars that we talked about? Is there one particular one that sort of really stands out to you? Is it the education piece?
It probably would be, yeah. But I mean, all aspects of a veteran life, those are important to me. Whether it's healthcare, because I have my different medical issues, business, anything, any way that we can help, I'm here to do it.
I've always found that to be the most interesting thing, and I'm not a veteran. In joining VBC, I've sort of been thrown into the deep end into veteran stories and the veteran experiences, and I think in the civilian world, in my mindset, you leave a job, you kind of move on from that job. But it's like, and I always thought, okay, well, you leave the Army, kind of move on from the Army. But there's this desire to continue public service beyond the military that sort of got you into the military to begin with. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that.
It's just a familiarity with veterans in general. Sometimes you feel a little different than those that hadn't served, and you feel this kind of connectedness to those that have, and you always, to me, want to help those that you feel that connection with.
What has been your favorite experience with VETlanta so far? Lloyd is listening. He asked me he said in the chat, he said, can you ask him this question? I just need to feel good tonight. Yeah. So.
I act as kind of like an administrative coordinator. So I get a lot of the incoming emails that ask for assistance, and connecting those people with the right person, that's very, I don't know, it's just kind of heartwarming.
Does your family, you went into the Army, what were their thoughts whenever you entered the military?
I was not from a military family. So my mom was kind of sad. I was one of those kids that really had anything I needed, didn't have to ask for anything. And so for me, it was a little different going into the military. It wasn't necessarily for the same things that a lot of other people went into it for. Like I said, I was quietly in the Marines Officers Program when I was in college, and they didn't really know about that experience. And also when I first signed over, because now I'm an adult in my mind, I didn't really share that with them either. And when I finally told them, they were kind of sad.
And how do they feel about it now?
Even before now, once I got in and I got settled, they were really proud. They were happy for me because I was happy.
We had sort of sent you a sort of pre-list of questions, and I've sort of diverged from those a little bit. But I love that you said here that to have fun, you sort of relax, you read, you exercise, you watch TV. Recently on the Scuttlebutt, we talked about post 9/11 war movies, and that none of them are all that good. But I wonder if you could give me a recommendation of one that might be good.
None. I couldn't give you a recommendation of any, because when I look at them, I'm always dissecting for what's wrong inside those movies.
Right. And so if you had all this to do over again, your Army career, would you select the same thing over again?
If I had, I may have chosen a different course within the military.
Which one?
No, I still would have probably went Army, but they had offered me different things like nuclear engineering and stuff like that. I went communications, but I probably would have chosen a different path, maybe.
You had mentioned that you were sort of in transition again. You're finding your new adventure. What is that?
Hopefully somewhere where I can help people. Like I said, I went back for an MBA in human resources. And whether it's human resources, employee relations, learning and development, which my experience is in, or recruiting, something along those lines where I can help someone.
Hassan,
Go ahead, Pete.
Hassan, do you know about the Georgia Vietnam Service Group?
No, I don't.
Okay. They are a very good organization. It's run by the state. They get the VA to say yes and maximize versus the VA that has a tendency to minimize and say no. Okay. Georgia Department of Veterans Service. That's what it is.
Yeah, we know them very, very well. Commissioner Roby and
Mike's a great guy. I did his story, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, great guy. But I just think Hassan would be good for that organization.
Yeah, Hassan, when we go back in person, I'll definitely touch a base with you. One of their leaders is a 4-block graduate as well.
Okay, sounds good.
I feel like we're just making connections all over the place tonight. I'm gonna need a nice good review from my boss after this one. Making connections, helping people. That's great.
Let me ask Lloyd. So Lloyd, do you guys go do like middle schools and high schools to make presentations?
Yeah, we really do that around Veterans Day. Of course, we're pretty popular, and we'll do that. Veterans Day is I stopped calling it Veterans Day and now call it Veterans Month. So we keep pretty busy with speaking engagements.
Okay, that's good. I know the kids are hungry for this knowledge. Everywhere I go in the school system, the kids, they're hungry, and the teachers don't know it. They can't teach it. When you call World War II, World War 11, you got a problem, okay?
It's at least a slight problem, I'd say. Mark Spiridigliosi.
Yeah, first off, Lloyd, Hassan, thank you very much for what you're doing. It's tremendous. And I am, greetings from Lancaster, Pennsylvania is where I live at, but I am always out trying to help the local veterans in our area. And you hit on it, Lloyd, whenever you talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's kind of like trying to pick fly crap out of pepper to find out which is good, which is bad, and which is evil. And my question to you is there a resource that would allow us to go out online someplace and discern between, I don't care about the ugly, they're pretty easy to get, but I mean, just finding that group that you can target, that if somebody comes to you and says, I'd like to volunteer and help with that, is there a website or any place in the world to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the good, the bad, and the ugly. Unfortunately, a lot of the ugly are veterans amongst us. So and you're right, Mark. They're easy to spot. So we often get hijacked at VETlanta summits by the ugly. So the best resource is to talk to each other, and that's the absolutely best. I vet every organization that I deal with. I don't give a second of my time or a cent of my money without vetting somebody. In VETlanta, we have pancake breakfast. We meet at 6:30 in the morning with any nonprofit organization, and then we ask them really forward questions and go through the vetting process. If you're looking to do a website, it's not a veteran website, but it's a charity vetting website, is Charity Navigator. And Zach, if you can pop that on the chat, that would be great. Charity Navigator will allow you to look at an organization's mission if they filed the Form 990, which is the tax exempt form. If you do their free service, you can actually review the Form 990. They're a bigger organization. They'll have a rating, and you'd be amazed at some of the organizations that we deal with all the time. That even you would think they would be great. Paralyzed Veterans of America is one of them. PVA does a lot of great things, but they do a lot of things not so great. And if you look on Charity Navigator, it can tell you what they've where they've done good and where they need help. So I absolutely look at every organization, make sure they're filing, make sure they're spending the money that they bring in, and make sure their earnings versus givings ratios not askew.
Okay, thanks, Lloyd. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mark.
Lloyd,
Thank you,
have
Mark.
had any dealings with Wounded Warriors?
You know, it's funny enough. I could do a whole call on Wounded Warriors, and you know, when we first started VETlanta, everybody was involved in Wounded Warrior, and I have some very strong feelings on Wounded Warrior, I think we've a couple things have happened with VETlanta. We've got the attention of our companies with all the other veteran organizations. You know, there's more than one, and then Wounded Warrior got rid of their leadership and hired some really competent leadership, and have kind of righted the ship over the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had dealings with them, and it really left a sour taste in my mouth.
Us too, and I had the opportunity to have a very frank conversation with the current CEO some years ago, and he listened, and I think he made some great changes. But if you ever want to talk about it, Pete, like I said, I can talk about some of my dealings with the old Wounded Warrior.
It would be a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's fun.
Okay.
Mark, they also, Dwight Bodorf put into the chat here, contact your local county veterans director. Every county in PA has one. I'm not sure. Lloyd, down in Georgia, is there a county veterans director as well?
No, very few counties or cities dedicate resources to the veterans. Some do, but one of the great things is we have a state, as Pete mentioned, is Georgia Department of Veteran Services. They try to do a good job with that, but the organization is just not big enough, and so we've really taken that role on in the greater 22 counties that surround Atlanta.
Would you say, and this is a question just popped to mind, did it surprise you that a lot of these Fortune 500 companies that sort of kick-started VETlanta in a way, did it surprise you that they were interested and passionate about veterans?
You know what? In some ways, it did, and in some ways, it didn't. And I'll start with it didn't at first. You know, in Fortune 500 companies in corporate America, we support veterans, and we support them because it's the right thing to do, and all that. But let's be honest, we support them because they give us a competitive advantage. You know, they're a labor resource that is usually highly motivated, highly disciplined, highly educated, and by spending money on veterans, we earn a competitive advantage. So, and then most companies, even the liberal companies that are out there, and I'll kind of watch my tongue on that, but almost every company I've ever dealt with is patriotic in some sort of ways, and want to support veterans, even with the nasty stuff that goes on with in the media and stuff like that. I've been really impressed on the patriotism and the commitment to veterans.
I was sad that Monique couldn't join us tonight. She does some work with VETlanta, actually goes around to HR departments to talk about veterans, sort of help bridge the military-civilian divide so that these civilian executives will understand a bit more about what their MOS was. How did that translate to the jobs that they have available? Why veterans are going to be good for their organization? Does VETlanta seem to root itself a little bit more in that type of work, trying to translate a lot of veteran speak to civilian organizations?
Yeah, that's great. I started this initiative very early on, and we've gone through different levels and phases. But when I got out in 2007, and when John Phillips, our co-founder, got out prior to that. There wasn't a whole lot of help, transition help. There was some, but not a whole lot. I had never written a resume. I didn't know how to translate my skills, and I kind of had to figure it out. Just the opposite is out there now for veterans who are transitioning. If their resume is bad, it's because they haven't looked and they haven't asked for help. There's so many great organizations. Hassan mentioned 4Block. We have Hire Heroes USA, which is national headquarters. That's or national organizations that headquartered here in Atlanta that writes resumes for spouses and veterans for free. There's U.S. Chamber of Commerce. There's all these organizations. Now there's probably too many, but you can be armed with a great resume. Where we saw a gap was not with resumes. Resumes started correcting themselves. A lot of veterans, when you sit down and interview with them, they do better with interviews than your non-veteran counterparts. What the gap was within our own companies. It was the recruiter or the hiring manager or the HR generalist that knew nothing about the military. And they would get a resume where they wouldn't understand like a job title or, somebody's skills and experience, didn't know how to translate it, didn't know where they fit in the organization. And so we aim to change that. So we developed our Military 101 initiative where we go in for free. Before the pandemic, it was lunch and learns. But now in the last 18 months, it's been Zoom meetings where for free, we will focus the generalist, the recruiter, the hiring manager, provide them really some military 101, information. But really what we're providing them is connections like we discussed before. Hey, if you see something that you're not familiar with, you can contact this person or, Charity Navigator. We teach them a little bit about Charity Navigator or go to, if somebody is a veteran that's working for you and you might have concerns, here's warning signs and here's who you can connect with. And so we've really taken great pride in doing that. And Monique's taken it to a very high level with her HR background.
That's great. Next, I want to bring in Zach. Zach, right before I come to you, we have a quick announcement from one of our board members, Sharon George. She was recently at a funeral today for a longtime VBC member, Henry Parham. And Sharon, I wanted to pop over to you if you wanted to say a few words about Henry.
Yes, another board member, Amber Spells, went along with me. And it was a beautiful service. Henry, I don't know, for those of you who possibly don't know this, was the last living survivor of the only African-American battalion that stormed the beaches of Normandy, Omaha Beach on D-Day. So he was something else. And it was a beautiful service. He's 99 years old. His great nephew paid a tribute to him, and he was a pastor, and it was beautiful. But he broke down Henry's 99 years in years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, and seconds. And Henry, in terms of seconds, has lived billions of seconds. So that was really, and this guy did it all without looking at a piece of paper, breaking down these numbers. The historicity of it definitely struck you, but what also strikes me always when it comes to the military, the horrific things that you guys see and experience, the one thing that you always seem to use is humor, and that is a powerful tool that you guys use. Well, some really hilarious things happened at this funeral that never took away, though, from the gravitas. But the funeral director went up and to move the flowers, and he knocked them on the floor. And then he turned around and knocked down another set of flowers. And then when the other funeral director went up to fix things, she almost knocked the flag on Henry's coffin off. And then when another pastor got up to speak about Henry, he kept calling him Kenneth. And the people in the funeral had to keep telling him, no, it's Henry. And he kept saying, thank you for correcting me. And in addition, he had new glasses, so he couldn't see. And he kept messing up, the Bible passages. And so this woman got up and pulled this giant magnifying glass out of her purse and brought it up to him, and he read with this magnifying glass. It was very endearing. And then when we went to the cemetery, he had the military salute. Something happened. And I'm going to preface it by telling you what Ethel told us afterwards. Mm-hmm. She had said, I want to talk to you about what happened at the end. And what happened was there was no rain, even though it looked like rain was imminent. But at the very end of the service, it rained for a minute. And Ethel told us this story that she's actually a Catholic and he's a Baptist. And sometimes she would make him go to the Catholic church. And she would say to him, you'll dip in the holy water. He'd say, no, I'm not a Catholic. And she said, come on. And he said, no. He said, when it rains, that's from God. So that's my holy water. So she said, in the end, when all of a sudden it started raining just for a minute and not heavy, she said, that's Henry. He's getting blessed. So it was a very powerful, day. And I'm grateful to have gone to it and grateful that the VBC has been able to tell his story.
That's correct, Sharon. Thank you for that. And thank you for the story. I just put into the chat not only the article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, but also from the VBC website, the bio, and there are links there for the interview with Henry Parham. If you are interested in checking out more of his story, obviously a legend passing. 99 years old. Wow. And what a life. I would have loved to have heard the numbers that his second nephew talked about.
Yes. And one last comment. The comment was made, Henry would have been 100 in November. And the comment was made, oh, geez, we would have loved to have gotten Henry to his 100th birthday so that Julia and he could have celebrated it together. Julia Parsons.
Julia, good evening. I know that you're here in the Zoom room as always tonight. Julia, it's always a pleasure to have you for our VETlanta folks. Julia was a Navy wave, one of the few that helped to decode Enigma. She lives here in eastern side of Pittsburgh, recently celebrated her 100th birthday. We had a heck of a parade for her that day, and we're going to be celebrating her again coming up on another VBC program later on this month. Isn't that right, Julia? I'll ask you to unmute. Oh, no, we can't hear you, Julia. Sometimes we have a little bit of technical difficulties. Nope, can't hear you now. Oh, I'm sorry, Julia. Thank you, though. But we're looking forward to the program with you in a couple of weeks. So for our VETlanta friends, if you'd like to pop back to us, check us out on our VBC website, veteransbreakfastclub.org, and you'll see Julia's upcoming interview. And let's see, there's Susie Gilliland also put in the chat, there is an article about Julia in the Northern Connection magazine this month. Julia, I don't know when you sleep. You are a very popular person. So I don't know how you even find time to join us, but it's always a pleasure to have you here. Jumping over now to Zach, I wanted to save the best for last. So Zach, welcome to the program. Great to have you on VBC.
Appreciate it, man. I don't know if I can follow that up. I don't know if I'm the best.
Well, we'll try. We'll certainly try. Zach, you are, what was it, five years Army?
Right at 6 years. So I've got pretty much 20 years Air Force under my belt.
I was about to say, I was like, how does 6 years translate at this point too? Because you're still active duty, is that right?
I'm actually more or less. I'm a National Guard guy, but I've been on active duty orders about the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. I'm actually getting medically discharged due to an injury from Afghanistan. So finally getting out, but not the best way possible.
And Afghanistan was your only deployment?
It was. I was over there with a couple of the ODAs with my infantry platoon.
Mm-hmm. And why did you decide to join the Army?
You know, I thought it'd be a great test of leadership. I was actually a police officer here in Atlanta before I ever joined the military. I did it backward. You know, usually it's military then police, but I was a police officer down here and wanted kind of to serve on a bigger platform. Where I was a cop, it was actually the backyard of where I grew up. So I figured, you know, what better way to test leadership and go, you know, take guys into combat and be careful what you ask for, as I think a lot of us know, you know.
Mm-hmm. What was that? I mean, you had to have been one of the the older guys joining in. How was that perceived in basic?
Now let's clear the air. All right. I'm just a young 32 right now. All right. You know, Hassan was over here talking about, you know, D-Day itself, and he was there. I'm like, man, that was way before I was born. I don't know.
So you were about 26 when you joined in?
I was right at 26, 27. I'd already had my bachelor's. So I went through basic training and OCS to get my commission.
So you're about, you know, you're only a decade older than most of the guys that were there.
Only. And trust me, they let me know pretty often.
So when you decided to enlist, what did your family think? What, you know, this, you know, wanting to be experience leadership on a bigger scale, what were their thoughts?
My dad was actually a Navy, bless his heart, Navy veteran from Vietnam. So he was excited. He kind of was like super excited about it. He and I are the only two that were ever serving in the family. And my mom was a mom, you know, helicopter mom. If you haven't seen the forums on Facebook of moms talking about basic training cadets that they don't get to talk to, that was my mom. Even though I was 27, 28, like, yeah, it was my mom.
Yeah. And what was it like? Did you feel like you right off the bat started to get that sort of leadership experience that you were looking for? Or how long, you know, what was the experience like?
Like I couldn't roll off the top bunk. Man, they put me on the top bunk and I had to stretch every morning just to get down. It was bad. Honestly, I was a SWAT guy here in Atlanta, and most of the drill sergeants recognized I was older than most of my drill sergeants. So they recognized, you know, not necessarily the young ignorance of a 17, 18-year-old that's going through basic training. So I got left alone, but playing catch up to an 18-year-old is not fun by any means.
No, definitely not. And what were your thoughts on Afghanistan whenever you first got there?
It's a beautiful country. The scenery is nice.
Yeah. What area? What area were you deployed to?
I was up in Kunduz. It's the northern part. I showed up. I think there were about 8 inches of snow on the ground, and by the time we left, it was about 130 degrees. So it's kind of a very drastic difference.
What months were you there?
From January, literally January 1, I landed and came back in September.
That's a heck of a New Year's.
Oh, it was a terrible New Year's. Awful. I celebrated in Germany and they wouldn't even let me drink like that. What crap is that?
Well, if that's not a reason to get out, I don't know what is.
You know.
Can I ask you about your deployment? You said you're like medically discharged. I wonder if it's all right to ask you about that.
Yeah. We a lot of people don't, I guess, recognize how much is still going on or was going on. I guess the last couple of weeks it's changing. But when I was attached to the Special Forces team, we were pretty much the muscle behind the Green Berets. I ended up banging my elbow at some point, have no idea when, but got some pretty hefty nerve damage and lost use of most of my left hand. It's pretty numb. But just had surgery in March on it, so hopefully it'll come back eventually. But overall, man, we just stayed busy. Like every 4 days, we were doing something, and it was very offensive under President Trump. And obviously, they kind of geared that down once he got out of office.
And obviously, leaving now for medical reasons, would you be sticking around if the opportunity were to present itself?
Yeah, I actually when I actually recognized the injury and started getting all the tests done on my arm, I was in Captain's Career Course down at Fort Benning. So I was fast-tracked for promotion after some work with the CDC during COVID. So I was all set to take command until all of a sudden, not really fit for duty anymore.
Right. And then how did you get involved with VETlanta upon that transition? I was hearing him Lloyd talk about translating skills. So as you came back to the States, did you think anything about that, translating skills, and how did VETlanta sort of come into your hemisphere there?
So I've actually been part of VETlanta a few years now. When I was in OCS, I started a business and grew that entrepreneurship mindset. So as I was off orders, I'd start another business and then keep running it when I was on orders. And part of that was just introducing a good friend of mine to Lloyd, who he's down here in Georgia. He has a school, a business college named after him, and he wrote a book that all the proceeds go to support veterans to go back to school at his business college down at Kennesaw State. So there's an introduction there, and then I expressed my interest, and Lloyd said, heck yeah, let's have some sort of National Guard liaison position, which was my first spot, where I'm really just trying to get resources National Guard, where, we're not used to that active duty life. From the time I left Afghanistan to the time I was back on my SOAP, it was only 5 days, and all my guys were already home by the time I got in the country. So like the on-ramp to deploy was pretty hefty, but coming back, it's like they just kind of didn't worry about anybody. Hey, you have a civilian job, go get back to it. Mm-hmm. So that really became a big, heavy focus where I wanted to be able to help the veterans in Atlanta, because we have such a huge base of veterans here, to actually have the resources, especially National Guard guys, because we're kind of underserved in that capacity. And then eventually it grew to being now I'm the marketing and communications chair. So I mentioned the platform earlier for Mark. There's a great partnership with Kaiser Permanente that's coming into place, and we're building out our own community online virtually. And we're able to execute that, which is a huge piece of the marketing, where all the content we have, all these resources, all the great things are actually going to be hosted on the VETlanta website, where you can log in. It's kind of like LinkedIn. You can log in, there's a forum, there's a discussion feed, all sorts of great things that are going to be there. And lots of our educational pieces, all those training courses we do, all the resources, everything's going to be in that one location. So it's going to be quick and easy. Because I know I've transitioned out, I can't find hardly anything. So there's so much, it's like a shotgun blast, In VETlanta, we're really going to be that tie point where it's all going to be quick and easy for you to find as you transition or as you need those resources.
This question could be both for you and Hassan, really. In that transition, you said it's really been difficult to find something. And how has that experience been?
And for me, I'm getting booted out of the military, so it sucks. We're all familiar, once you get out, you lose that identity, you lose that uniform. And when it's not voluntary, it's kind of a pain in the butt for sure. Put it very politely in front of folks. But it's one of those, it's difficult because it's hard, and we talk about it a lot. It's hard to translate our hard skills and soft skills into the civilian world, when realistically we have some of the best skills in the world. We just have to figure out how to articulate that into the corporate world, which is a lot of what I like to focus on in the business world, is helping veterans move over into how their skills, whether it's infantry or Air Force or whatever it may be, like you have amazing skills. How do you translate those into ways that corporate owners, corporate business leaders will be able to understand enough to be like, hey man, you're a phenomenal individual that we want on the team.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me that pitch? That I love that description. If I'm an executive, how do you come into the room to sort of give me that definition, help me to understand that other side?
So a big part of it's actually coaching. I have a podcast called The Tactical Leader. A lot of it's actually through that, where I teach the veteran how to translate those skills themselves, where I don't necessarily want to walk into a room and say, hey, I'm a veteran, hire me. We're entitled to it. I think that entitlement, especially among my generation, I'm a millennial. Our generation is just ridiculous with, hey, I expect this here and now. Deborah, it's called The Tactical Leader. And you can find it pretty easily on iTunes and across. But really, I just focus on, you look at the value of leadership. You look at what we did in deployment and garrison, from logistics. I'm an infantry dude, and I ran logistics for CDC. So you translate that into what we can do in the corporate world. I'm a knuckle dragger as close as I can be to a Marine, So it's like, when you can translate that into, all right, I get the job done, I'm task oriented, I'm focused, I'm disciplined. I can do all these different things where when you put me in a leadership position, you know the job's going to get done because we are that dedicated to accomplishing the mission. When you can start articulating those things, it really makes a difference for, yeah, I'm a trigger puller, but this is actually what I was doing on the back end in Afghanistan.
So a lot of it is demystifying that, you come in and do a lot of executives in your experience. Do they sort of think like, okay, you were in combat, but I don't understand how to translate any of that. So really it's about saying like, well, no, there's a lot more that goes into deployment than, just being in a combat situation.
Absolutely. I mean, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge.
One thing I do like here is that in the chat, though, you guys like to rib each other a lot. There's been a lot of good brotherly support here as well. Lloyd says, Zach, you've been accepted for a PhD program in business. That's congrats. That's pretty awesome. But you also gave Hassan some love and said, he's the backbone of the organization. So don't let him be humble. So yeah, there's some good ribbing going on, but it's good to see the support as well. Can you talk a bit about the PhD program?
Yeah, it's honestly just furthering. I have an MBA currently, just trying to learn more about business. I'm big on furthering that education piece. So it's one of those, I think it'd be kind of cool to be called Dr. Zach. I mean, it's just kind of silly, but it's like a check the block for myself where I never thought I'd get a bachelor's, and here I am. I was a homeschooled guy in middle school and high school. So like I have a GED and now I'm going for a PhD. It's kind of a crazy turn of events. And honestly, that's something like the military taught us, having that dedication to actually get done. I did about half my MBA in Afghanistan. And it just getting that done. It's one of those that just kind of helps motivate, where I'm setting a great example in that capacity where, yeah, I'm infantry and I'm Army, or, for the crown eaters, we're still smart, right? We have a lot more to add to it than just that piece. So setting that example for the guys I brought back, I mean, that's a huge thing. And Lloyd's going to call me doctor. He waited for my hands to get off the keyboard, and then he wants to start ribbing me. It's cool, Lloyd. I got you.
I would love for our podcast, The Scuttlebutt and the Tactical Leader, to do a collaborative podcast, because I think, as we've talked tonight and experienced tonight, one of the biggest issues here is that transition. But I love this passion you had for leadership. And did you feel like you got that out of the military? You got what you were looking for?
Yeah. Like I said earlier, be careful what you ask for, because I definitely got, to me, the greatest test of leadership is that if bullets flying at you, you say 2 words and guys respond. I mean, they don't question it. They're like, yeah, I know he has the best interest. I have that trust. And that's what leadership is. It's influence, pure and simple. So if you can influence somebody under fire, it's just an absolutely huge test of it. And then really for me, the biggest test was coming back. I mean, trying to keep guys together after deployment, especially when there's no off ramp. And it's like, hey, go back to your civilian careers. I mean, there are divorces, we've had a couple of arrests, DUIs from the platoon. And it's like, that's where the real leadership piece started for me that I didn't really expect. I'm like, yeah, in Afghanistan, that's where it's going to be the leadership piece. But coming back, it's like keeping myself together and keeping my guys together has been really difficult. And a big piece of that, definitely the podcast. I mean, it turned into like a therapy session for me. I brought in thought leaders that are experts in that field, but even Kevin, he's on the call. I mean, he has Vets Talk. I mean, there's a collaborative going on there where with Vets Talk and his podcast, there are different things about us sharing our stories. And there's a piece of that of like, that's the healing piece. If you can just start sharing your story and start talking about it, I mean, it's like therapy, right? Literally, if you can actually get to the point where you're talking about it and share your story on something like a platform like Vets Talk or VETlanta or these types of podcasts, I mean, it just puts you in the right direction so that you can start that process, because that is the hardest part, is like accepting, all right, now I have to talk about it. Now I have to get through it. Now I have to start that healing process and recognizing that.
Totally. I like this idea of leadership. Hassan, who would you say was a leader that you looked up to while in the military?
Zach might not like this. All right.
Say it. Don't say it.
It was this one Air Force guy.
It all comes full circle.
But he didn't really present himself to be as an Air Force guy. When I first met him, I was, I guess, in my early 20s when I had gone to Saudi Arabia. And he worked with our units, with our but he came across like he was an Army or a Marine, and he just carried himself differently.
Mhm.
Actually, the second time when I was in when I went over with special operations, he was actually my commander. And then even the third time I went over, I kept in communication with him. So he was a leader that I always kept in touch with because I valued his opinion.
Zach, a leader you looked up to?
Definitely not an Air Force guy. You know, we had, and unfortunately, we lost him over there. But we had a sergeant major, Ryan Sarter. He was a Green Beret, and he was that guy. I mean, I was in every brief. I was in everything that NATO was putting out in Afghanistan, and I remember distinctly, he was that sergeant major that just like owned the room. He was short, he was bald, he was just like a powerful presence, man. He walked in and like people just stopped. And he walked in and he put a captain, he walked in and told a captain, he's like, hey man, you're being a little B word and just listening to what they tell you to do. Stop. You're not treating your guys well. And that was who he was. I mean, he just owned every piece of it. He kept everybody accountable. And unfortunately, on one of our operations, and I want to share this part because it just leads to how powerful of a guy he was. Somebody to his side got shot when he was about to fall off a building, and he actually reached over, grabbed him, and got shot in the head in the process, and both of them died. But that's the kind of guy he was. I mean, just powerful leader nonetheless, but just, you know, talk about a leader to look up to, like literally gave himself to save somebody else.
Wow. Lloyd, I want to ask you the same question, but since you are the leader of VETlanta, I want to ask you what leadership qualities that you like to emulate for your organization.
Great question. The the motto of the Air Force First Sergeant is "People are our business." So all the leaders I've admired in the past have been the people, just like Zach and Hassan mentioned, the leaders that take care of their people. So yeah, absolutely. So I've learned a lot about leadership while I was in the military. Most when I got out off the plane and became a first sergeant, and then I learned a lot in UPS. You know, I had to lead a very different way with UPS, and then VETlanta has been a phenomenal leadership experience because you lead. We're volunteers. There's no paid employees, and we ask a lot of our volunteers. So I've got to have a very different kind of leadership style, because if I go in there, with too militaristic, too first sergeant-ish, too UPS-ish, like UPS is a lot like the military. All my volunteers are gonna quit. So it's more of a collaborative approach. It's trying to inspire people to do their best and bring out their best.
That's great. Where do you see VETlanta going from here? You have the summits. How does it expand?
You know, it's a good question. It's something we always ask ourselves. We've gone through. We're pretty lucky. We have three great executive advisors. One of them is Steve Cannon. Zach, can you pull up Steve Cannon's bio and drop it on? So Steve is, the president of the Arthur Blank family company of businesses. We have John Tien, who's just been added to the Biden administration, and then we have Chris Peck. Chris Peck is my mentor, a retired UPSer. So they really give us some guidance. We've been lucky enough to sit down with McKinsey and Company over the last 18 months. And one of the big decisions we came to about our future is not to become a 501c3. We just went through this whole process on, hey, we do everything with, I think Steve mentioned it, with chicken wire and duct tape. We don't have any money. So yeah, you know, if we ever need money, like we had to get our logo trademarked. We pass a hat between the board of directors, right? We never go to our membership for money. So we've constantly had to look on how do we sustain this, and so we have this big long spiel about do we become a 501c3 and start fundraising and wrap and change the organization, and the answer was an overwhelmingly no, we don't. We do more of who we are and focus on maybe not getting bigger. You know, maybe we don't get bigger. But, you know, maybe 5 years from now we're 10,000 people. Maybe we're 4,000 people. But it's getting the right people in the right room for the right reasons is what we're really focusing on.
I like that. Right people, right room for the right reasons, especially coming from the good, the bad, and the ugly. You want to make sure that, you know, everything is going the right way. And it seems like it really is, especially with the expansion of how many people you've been able to reach over the last, 8 years. And of course, collaborating with VBC, I got to say that, that was a good, smart business choice on your part.
It's really cool on kind of the where we've gone. We never saw us as ourselves as a national organization, and we got asked all the time to like expand. Hey, go national, and our take was no, we're local. We want to impact our local community, and the more we go, if we try to go national, it would spread ourselves thin. It would change who we are. But one thing we've done is we've collaborated with cities across the country, and we've even given them our charter. We've given them our best practices, our lessons learned. We've even given a couple our logo and our name. Birmingham tried to start a vet BHAM group, and Charlotte was messing around with it, so that offer is open to Pittsburgh or anybody else who wants to hear our story.
It's fantastic. I know we're coming up to our end time here, but I wanted to make sure if there were any questions here in the chat, or questions that anybody would like to raise their hand and ask of our new VETlanta friends. You feel free to pop it in the chat here, or just go ahead and speak up. I want to thank you guys for coming on and just being a part of the program tonight and sharing your stories and your time with us and your passions, really. It's great to hear that so much is going on down in Atlanta, and that you guys are a big part of that. And I think Pete, it's great that you guys are able to connect. We've recently connected with Pete. He's hosting one of the programs here with VBC on Thursday nights. So having that connection there is great. I'm really happy about that. And I know, Kevin, you don't have your video on, or I'm not sure if you can go. I'm going to ask you to unmute Kevin Horgan. You were the first person we chatted with as we started to get to know VETlanta. You sort of introduced us to Lloyd, but I wanted to say thank you to you as well, if you'd like to speak up.
Thanks very much for having us, Sean.
Thanks
very much for having us, Sean. I have nothing to add. Certainly all the speakers today, I really appreciate my VETlanta teammates for being on, and thank you, Sharon, for sharing the story about Henry tonight. It's there's really not much to say after that. And Julia's with us, so if Julia could say hello, that'd be great.
Hey, let me throw in a plug for Kevin Horgan. I dropped that Vets Talk in there. Watch Kevin Horgan's Vets Talk. So he's got this amazing Vets Talk about coming home from OTS and running into a drunk Santa Claus Marine Corps veteran, and it's a pretty incredible story, and he tells it very well.
That's great. And Zach says that I let the beast out of the cage, so I'm sorry that I unmuted Kevin here for the final minute. That's pretty much all the beast we can handle here at VBC. Julia, it's great to having you a part of this, and everyone here with VBC. Sharon, thank you for sharing Henry's story. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. I'm grateful for you for joining us, VETlanta, and hoping for more collaborations here in the future. Definitely looking forward to the Tactical Leader. I'll give that a listen. Zach, thank you. Hassan, best of luck in the transition to the new. And Lloyd, hope the summit is very successful coming up.
Thank you all. Take care. Be safe.
You as well. Everybody have a great night. Thank you so much.